Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm recording my top picks, my best reads of 2020 video. And I haven't recorded a video like this, I think ever. I just never had this much time on my hands to read. With the pandemic, it definitely allowed me to open up some more of my availability to read. So this year, I'm so proud to say that I've read 15 books, which may not seem like a lot to some people, but to me, that's a lot. That's more than one book a month, slightly over. So I'm pretty proud of myself that I was able to kind of just rapidly go through them. I've now narrowed down my top picks, and I'd almost put them in the category as I would recommend reading them, for sure, absolutely, but I also might even read them again. And one of the books that I do have to share today, I have read for the second time. Before going ahead with the video, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below, the notification bell, and the thumbs up button so I know to film more future book videos like this one. So just a little preface before I start talking about the books. Almost all of my books I now read on a Kindle unless I am getting it from the library. I don't purchase hard copy books anymore. I have my reasons. Clutter, I just don't need more of it. But the overall feeling, I obviously prefer reading a hard copy book, but I don't have any more space in my bedroom to store books and books and books, especially with how quickly I'm filtering through them. So everything that I have to share with you guys today is basically read on a Kindle or I got from the library. So these books are in no specific order. I just wrote them down here on a little list and a little bit about each one. They're in the order of when I read them, so that's about it. Other than that, there's no like number one's the best, number 7th is the worst. I feel pretty equal towards each one for different reasons. So the first book being, I think this definitely was, if I had to pick a favorite from this list, if I absolutely had to pick a favorite, it would be this one. I know I said I wouldn't do this, but I just enjoyed this one so much. I hope that she writes another one in the future, and it is A Woman Makes a Plan by Mae Musk, and it is a autobiography. So Mae Musk, yes, you've heard right, she is Elon Musk's mother, and she wrote a book. It's a very short read about her upbringing, what it was like before she had all her kids, what it was like being in an abusive relationship, moving from country to country at such a young age, figuring out life, figuring out school, and becoming a model, and being Elon Musk's mom, and raising her grandkids, which are Elon Musk's kids, and her other kids' kids. So it's just such an interesting story. Every time I turned a page, I wanted more. I wanted to read and read and read, and I think I got this book done within a few days just because, like I said, it's a pretty thin book, very easy, and she has such a humor to her writing and the way she speaks in the book. Like, I feel like I'm in the room with her when she's speaking in this book. It was very enjoyable, so I highly recommend if you enjoy reading autobiographies or biographies, you'll get a kicker out of this one. I think it's very good, and there's a lot of life lessons that you get to hear from her firsthand. The next book is Youre Not Special by Megan Rinks, and this is a sort of memoir. That's what she labels it on the cover of the book. She is a YouTuber. I would say she is more of a podcaster now. She doesn't film content for YouTube as frequently as she did like 8 years ago. I read this book, and I did mention it in another video I filmed earlier this year, which I will link that one down below because I do talk about a couple of these books. And a sort of memoir, Youre Not Special by Megan Rinks, was in there, and I really enjoyed this book in the sense that I followed Megan for years and years on YouTube, and I really liked her personality and, you know, her hauls and her beauty videos, and there was a lot of stuff that happened like with her parents and friends that happened behind closed doors, and it was publicized a little bit over social media, and then you kind of never heard anything more about it. So she covers a lot of this in her book, and I think she does a really, really good job at explaining kind of what went on in her life in the time being. The only dislike I like to this book is there was a couple chapters, maybe even more than that, I can't remember now because I read it more than 6 months ago, but that it was very like self-helpy feeling, and she was giving like advice about anxiety and depression and such, and that's totally fine, but I just don't think she spoke about or prefaced in the description of the book on anywhere like Amazon or whatever, Barnes and Noble, that there's so much like depression and anxiety like talk and tips and stuff. That's really not a huge thing I'm into reading about, and I know that some of the reviews when I read online after I read this book, I was curious to what other people thought. A lot of people thought the same thing. They're like, we would have loved for you to expand more on, you know, how you created your movie and how you went about getting the cast for that, and one of the characters in that movie that you created as a YouTuber was a main character in Pretty Little Liars, and that was a huge show. So I do like the book overall. I would recommend it. I would read it again, but there was a few chapters I'm like, she could have filled this with something else and made a whole other book on depression and anxiety, since that is such a main part of her life that she not promotes but speaks a lot to. The next book is called 3 Minutes Could Save a Lifetime by Jennifer Schoenfeld. I think that's how you pronounce it. And this book I came across by, not accident, but I was at the bank one day and the teller that was actually helping me out, we just got to talking and chatting, and I told her I had a podcast, and she told me that she was an author and she wrote books. So I Googled the book that she had told me about that she had written, and it was written in 2016. And I don't want to say it's like a biography, or I guess autobiography, because she wrote it, but there's a lot of like spiritual experiences that she had and like revelations and such. I'll just read the description of this one because this one's a little bit harder to explain. And I didn't think I'd like it as much as I did, but I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I really want to have her a guest on my podcast someday. She is a little bit busy and tied up with the writing she's doing and the side hustle she's got going on, as well as her bank teller job. So she doesn't really have time for it right now, but I would love to have her on my podcast in the future. I'm just gonna read the description to you from Amazon. So she said, "Just when I was anticipating the most precious milestone in my life, it took an unexpected turn. That's when I became a witness to divine intervention. I felt weightless, I felt like pure energy. This was a once in a lifetime experience, and I had a good idea of what was going on. This was my journey to self-awareness. I was granted not one, but 2 experiences so powerful it turned my tragedy into a defining moment. You will understand how having faith and believing in the Divine One will give you access to an unseen support system. You have the ability to call upon the same power to manifest all your dreams and desires as I have. Believe in yourself that you have the same magic in you to transform your life. You can connect with and utilize this unlimited power source the universe offers by learning to recognize these same signs and symbols that I receive. This is the way you too can achieve a life filled with joy, peace, and contentment." So she did, it's coming back to me now, but talk about again, kind of like certain abusive relationships she was in, how she got out of them, what she conquered, what she felt, what kind of signs she was seeing around her to get herself out of these situations. And again, it was kind of like an addictive read. I didn't think I'd enjoy it as much as I did, but I just flew right through that one too. This one's 374 pages, so it's like a good medium length. I would love if her book became on like the bestsellers list, because I do really think it's one of those hidden gems that should be on that list, but isn't. The next book I want to share is called Life After Life by Raymond A. Moody Jr., an MD. And this one was so interesting to me, and I found out about this book through another YouTuber, because every story that's in this book is from a person's near-death experience. So things that they saw in another like realm, in another world, and then they came back to life, which sounds kind of crazy, but doesn't sound impossible. I highly recommend reading this book if you're really curious about like life after your life and death and where your body goes, where your soul goes. If you believe in any of that stuff, I think this is just a really good book to kind of broaden your knowledge and just way of thinking about life. I'll read the description for this one too because I do think it's really good. In Life After Life, Raymond Moody investigates more than 100 case studies of people who experienced a clinical death and were subsequently revived. First published in 1975, this classic exploration of life after death started a revolution in popular attitudes about the afterlife and established Dr. Moody as the world's leading authority in the field of near-death experiences. Life After Life forever changed the way we understand both life, death, selling millions of copies to a world hungry for a greater understanding of this mysterious phenomenon. The extraordinary stories presented here provide evidence that there is life after physical death, as Moody recounts the testimonies of those who have been to the other side and back, all bearing striking similarities of an overwhelming positive nature. These moving and inspiring accounts give us a glimpse of the peace and unconditional love that await us all. So this is a super interesting book. I never thought I'd get myself to read something like this, but I highly recommend. There's so many different perceptions and things that people have experienced and felt like they've seen that I think would be interesting to expose yourself to. So go read it, it's a good one. The next book was popular like a few years ago, but I only got around to reading it recently because it was assigned to me in my book club that I joined this year, which is another thing I'm so grateful for. And it's called Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. Gillian Flynn is a really good author. I read Gone Girl by her, and it's one of my all-time favorite books. I'd definitely say it'd be in my top 3. And the movie was actually very well done as well. So that's obviously always impressive when you think it's close to the book or it has really good similarities. So Sharp Objects is the one we read for book club. Very, very disturbing story. It's about this woman who grew up in this small town but left her town to become a reporter, and then some deaths happen in her old town that she's told as a reporter has to go cover. There's a reason why she left that town, and then the story unfolds as to why, what happened to these girls, who did it, etc. It exposes you to her relationship with her mother and her sister. There's a little bit of romance going on with the detective. I don't want to give away more than that, but I think it is a good story in the sense that if you're really into thriller and some crazy crap, then definitely give it a read. But I would not recommend this to everyone. With the title being titled Sharp Objects, there is cutting. The main character does cutting a lot of it. So it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to see it. I know HBO created a show based on the novel, so the show is definitely more disturbing than the book if you're a visual person for like graphics. So again, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. It can be a hard read for people who are triggered by these certain things, but as an author, as a story writer, I think Gillian Flynn has a lot of talent, and she's quite descriptive with the storytelling. So I have to put it on my list. I definitely think it was a good read for the year. It was disturbing. I felt uncomfortable and weird after reading it, but it was a good book. And the genre for Sharp Objects is fiction. The next book is one that I had already read a few years ago, and it's Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso. And it doesn't say what kind of book it is, but I'm going to claim it as an autobiography. From what I read, she wrote the entire book, and it's a very short read. I think it's like a little more than 200 pages, under 300 pages. I love it. I think it's so empowering and motivating hearing this, person start from nothing, which is how every, I feel like, entrepreneurial story starts, and then grow her business into something. She is the founder of Nasty Gal, which was an online clothing company, and now I'm pretty sure they've been bought out by Boohoo from what I've heard. So there's a lot of like back-end stuff that they don't have covered in the book, just because Nasty Gal has went a little bit downhill after the release of this book. The release of this book was like prime time of that online clothing shop, whereas now not a lot of people shop from it anymore. But regardless, to say the least, she does cover a lot of her life and how she got to where she is. And she shares her tips and tricks, stuff she's not proud of doing, her experiences in life, what she's learned from them. And she just seems like a badass boss. She's just so cool. I don't know. I would love to meet her, have her on my podcast. And I've listened to her podcast as well. There's a podcast by her called Girl Boss Radio. So highly recommend listening to that if you're into female entrepreneurship, girl bosses. And she also did release one season of Girl Boss on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there, but apparently the show didn't do very well, so they didn't continue with the filming of it. But it's very similar to the book, and I'd recommend just watching the show after reading the book because it seems pretty good. I'm sure you could Google it and find it. The last book is called Educated by Tara Westover, and this is a memoir. And this was a popular book title I saw floating around the internet for quite some time, a couple years ago. And I only got around, again, to reading it recently because it was in the book club. It was assigned to us. It was a very interesting story about Mormons and like socialism and politics and the government, and how Tara Westover grew up such a certain way, and her parents had such strong beliefs with no medicine, everything is herbal and spiritual and natural. They don't take anything from the government, they don't send the kids to school, they don't get vaccines. It's just super crazy, like reading a story like that and then like thinking about the pandemic we're currently in and the vaccine that will be coming out, or will be out at this time that I post this. And I saw her on a couple interviews online. If you just Google like Tara Westover on YouTube, she's on like Bill Gates' channel and she does an interview with him. She does one with Oprah, she does one with Ellen DeGeneres, and I'm like almost like, I don't know her, but I feel so proud of her for her to be able to accomplish so much in her life, and getting out of her small town, entering a bigger one, and going to school and learning and just being the odd duckling out, really, and asking questions in class that were embarrassing, but she didn't know any different because she was raised a certain way and sheltered from so much of the world. So she learned so much of the things that you would learn younger, so much later in life when she was in her 20s. I really like this book. It was very like felt. I was hurting for her. Certain parts of the book, the stuff she had to go through, and her abusive brother in the book, her abusive dad. Her dad was bipolar, and then her mom being a midwife. Super interesting story. She has a lot of siblings as well, so just like learning the dynamics between everyone. There's so many characters. I think she's the youngest of like 7 or 8 kids, which is wild because you don't really see that nowadays in where we live, at least. And it's so interesting to learn from other people's experiences and livelihood. So I highly recommend that book as well. I think it was a good read, and it exposes you to and broadens your knowledge to so much more out in the world. Well, those were my top 7 books of 2020. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down below what books you have read this past year that you really enjoy, and I'll be sure to add them to my book list. I'm excited to tackle a bunch for 2021. I have a list that is growing. I've really been into reading. I've always been into reading, but I've had more time to do it recently, so I'm very thankful for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all in my next video.